I'm going to make this video as respectful as I can, which is not easy for me. I'm going to be respectful because the person I'm responding to, Bane666au, has been respectful in my comments. Bane commented on my video about transgender bathrooms, where I said MRAs should be supporting transgender bathroom rights. He said, "Which MRAs aren't supporting transgender bathroom rights?" I agree with you about misandry, by the way. Okay, Bane. The MRM has produced mixed feelings on the issue. I'm merely saying the movement should be unanimously in favor of it. As far as which MRAs don't support transgender bathroom rights, well, that's where we get into this problem of what is an anti-feminist and what is an MRA. Honestly, there is no difference, at least not in practice. I made a video calling out Hunter Avalon, and Bane made a comment on that video, and he had this to say. "For the most part, I agree with you. But what makes you think this guy is an MRA? As far as I can tell, he doesn't identify as an MRA. He doesn't advocate for the rights and issues of men. And I've certainly never heard of him before. Sure, he's an anti-feminist, but being an anti-feminist doesn't automatically make you an MRA. In fact, most anti-feminists aren't MRAs. The two terms are not synonymous. In fact, many prominent MRAs have criticized the far-right attitudes, gynocentric, of people like this guy. Well, Bane, what makes Hunter not an MRA? Is an MRA just an anti-feminist who wears the label MRA? Honestly, it would appear so. There is a pretty big difference between MGTOW and the MRM. The MRM is hyperfixated on feminism, feminism, feminism. It's all they talk about. And this is true with anti-feminists. In fact, anti-feminists and the MRA attack the same topics and do it using the same arguments. In practice, there's no difference. But MGTOW seems to be more focused on the way women treat men and the way men react to women. It's more about human nature, human behavior, and how the sexes relate to each other. It is often laced with biological determinism, which at times gets downright silly with some of the baseless and factually incorrect evopsych theories. MGTOW is highly opposed to marriage and other situations where women hold power and dominion over men, with Razorblade Candy going as far as to bring up that paying a prostitute is submission to a woman, since you are making a sacrifice to her. Women hold the power of pussy over men. Whether you sacrifice your wallet to a hooker or a housewife makes no difference. Both are an act of male weakness submitting to the sexual power of women, where only one side makes a lasting profit. In prostitute versus trick, the power dynamic is the same as drug dealer versus junkie. The dealer holds the power, the hooker holds the power, the housewife holds the power. Only from the MGTOW community do we see anything philosophical discussing relational power dynamics. The only thing the MRM or anti-feminists do is non-stop blame all perceived unfairness on a movement called feminism. And your channel, Bane, can be used as a perfect example of this. I go to your channel and I keep clicking the show more until all of your videos appear on the page at one time. I then type in femin so that the words feminist and feminism and feminists, all three words will show up by using femin. And how many times do you either say feminists, feminist, or feminism? 129 of your videos have those words right in the title. Your channel is almost exclusively griping about feminism. Yet you're an MRA. And when anti-feminists who non-stop gripe about feminism decide to gripe about feminism, that's different than when you do it? How is it different? Again, your channel is obsessed with attacking feminism. Anti-feminists are obsessed with attacking feminism. Am I supposed to believe that the arguments are different? Because I honestly haven't seen evidence that even the arguments are any different. Now, the reason I don't just call myself MGTOW and be done with it is because too many people want to argue about what MGTOW is, and there are some disagreements between various factions. Then you've got people giving numeric designation to certain MGTOW based on what life decisions they make or how awakened they are, and a lot of other things like that. And I just don't want to have to wear the label and deal with that mess. I'd rather just push for equal rights for men. But I can't call myself MRA because I believe the movement has been completely co-opted by the radical right. MRAs are beginning to remind me of the Alex Jones crowd way too much, especially when they start in with this paranoid government conspiracy theory that all injustices to the male sex, every bad behavior committed by women, is a Marxist plot to divide and conquer us, and to make us men and women interchangeable with the lie of equality, to break up the nuclear family and make us more reliant on the government, as part of a cultural Marxist plot to make our culture crave big government to rule over us and evenly distribute goods and services just like communist Russia. I swear to God, that's more ridiculous than the 9/11 truthers. In all fairness, I can't say this is a new development. This conspiracy theory has been a staple of the men's movement since day one. And God help you if you attempt to hold women responsible for their own bad behavior, because then MRAs will call you misogynist and remind you that the enemy is feminism. Not women, it's just feminism. In fact, I'm in the middle of making a video rebuttal to a guy who has done just that. He has way more subscribers than you do, Bane. And I absolutely know, you will say, but he's not an MRA. Dude, all of his gender rants are nothing more than the same hyperfixation on the feminist movement as your channel. So what's the fucking difference? I'm tired of this cop-out. MRAs need to look in the mirror. They need to do some self-reflecting. And they can't do this until they learn to take some criticism. And they refuse to take criticism because they can just yell, not all MRAs are like that. And part of yelling not all MRAs are like that is insisting that high-profile examples aren't really MRAs, they're just anti-feminists. And again, what's the difference? I don't mean the theoretical difference, I mean the real-world difference in practice. All you two groups do is bitch about feminism, feminism, feminism. An MRA is just an anti-feminist who chooses to wear the label MRA. An anti-feminist is an MRA that doesn't want to wear the label. All of your gripes about feminism, all of your gripes about feminists are the same gripes, the same tactics. You're one and the same. You all hang in the same circles, interviewing each other, reblogging each other, retweeting each other, and promoting each other. So, fuck if I can tell the difference. Another MRA commented on my channel, and wanted to rebuttal my reason for not calling myself an MRA. This guy defending MRAs, and thus it's only fair to assume that he is an MRA, had this to say.
You are way off about MRA. I even dare say you are really dishonest about MRA. They are not about going back to the Stone Age. They just don't want to go against nature. Men and women being the same is that feminist bullshit.
And I replied to him, I claim that too many MRAs don't give a shit about men's rights. They just bitch about feminism, not because feminism hurts men, but because it breaks outdated gender roles. And then you come by and claim I got it all wrong, and then basically agree with my point when you said they just don't want to go against nature. Meaning, you support traditional gender roles. Of course, you are trying to use nature as an argument. But this is a stupid argument. Stealing is natural and instinctive, yet we teach children not to steal. But that goes against nature. Hitting people when you are angry is natural and instinctive. But we teach people not to hit, and we even lock them up. How dare we go against nature? And to top it off, men working 9 to 5 is not natural. We have only recently started doing this. 2 million years of evolution, and we've only started working 40-hour weeks for some corporation for a couple of 100 years. Also, the role of men and women throughout nearly 2 million years of human evolution has pretty much been the same. Men and women spent most of their days doing nothing, and the rest of the day gathering. Hunting was a rare thing, and no one knows what the male to female hunting ratio was. We spent most of 2 million years living in very small mud huts, with no clothes, no real house chores, not even fire to cook with, and sitting on our lazy asses, occasionally getting up to gather food and water. Furthermore, traditionally, past couple of thousand years, women had a ton of housework to do that took from sunup to sundown. Now they have electric appliances to do their work for them, and they have school acting as a babysitter, and spend most of their day watching TV and gossiping on the phone. That isn't natural. But you have yourself convinced that it is. Here you are defying nature, calling it nature. Any excuse is better than no excuse to be a primitive, regressive fucktard. You've proven my point. I claimed my beef with MRAs is that too many of them are just primitive and regressives wanting to reestablish outdated gender roles. You defend MRAs and proceed to agree that MRAs want to reestablish those outdated gender roles. You packaging the rationality behind nature does not disprove my point that MRAs want to reestablish outdated gender roles. And as I have just demonstrated, your excuse of it's nature is completely bullshit. And you want to know what this brainiac MRA responded with? He says, I just want to know one thing. How could anybody be created by nature and then be enough of a fool to dismiss that what created you? Yeah, I have no rebuttal to that kind of level of retardation. But there's your MRA. And this guy's clearly an MRA. He's defending the men's rights movement. And like I said, he basically confirmed exactly what I said, that these people are mostly about reestablishing good old-fashioned traditional gender roles of women stay home and men do all the work. Which might not have been so bad a few hundred years ago. But in this day and age, men working is a man slaving his life away, and a woman staying at home is propping her feet up and watching TV. That's not a division of labor when only one person is doing labor. So it's not even really traditional. It's just outdated, primitive, regressive, right-wing Republican thinking. And this guy's basically confirming it. Now I know a common rebuttal to this is to say, but that's just one person. He doesn't represent the entire men's rights movement. Okay, fair enough. But he is an example of one, he's just one example of many, many MRAs who think this way. And the MRAs that don't think this way don't tend to be very vocal about those who are. They're too busy bitching about feminism to even address these other people who call themselves MRAs who are like that. They can't be bothered to respond and say, your beliefs are not the beliefs of the MRM. They can't do that. They're too busy making another anti-feminist video about Anita Sarkeesian. So I think there's something to this. It's not just, oh, you found one example. No, he's just one of many, many. So I say this. It is absolutely fair to call a person who complains about feminism an MRA. However, if a person makes one gripe just one time about feminism, it's not fair to call that person an MRA. But if they write multiple blog posts, or make multiple videos bashing feminism, they're MRAs. After all, Bane, your entire channel is nothing but griping about feminism. Take a look at the Amazing Atheist or Thunderfoot. Many people cite them as not MRAs, but merely anti-feminists. But let me ask you something. If you removed every video from their channel that isn't one of their anti-feminist gripes, how would anyone look at their channels and your channel and tell that you three are not a part of the same movement? In what way, Bane, do your anti-feminist arguments not match up to Thunderfoot's anti-feminist arguments? He makes jokes about how crazy feminists are. You make jokes about how crazy feminists are. Yet Thunderfoot is commonly referred to as an anti-feminist, while you are referred to as an MRA. The only difference I can see between you two is that 100% of your videos are anti-feminist videos. And Thunderfoot's channel has only recently in the past couple of years started picking on feminists, and percentage-wise is still an atheist channel. So the only real difference is the amount of dedication to anti-feminism. Honestly, I think that's what we're all doing. If someone is exclusively about anti-feminism, we call them MRAs, unless they go on record to call themselves something else. And if they are only occasionally anti-feminist, we call them anti-feminist, which is kind of ironic that this mentality translates to MRA is just more anti-feminist than anti-feminists are. And what's even more ironic, you bring up Nick Redding from Men's Rights Edmonton in a recent video. You call him a friend and an MRA. Yet he has a video claiming that he doesn't care about men. He only wants to hurt feminists. And he admitted to participating in an anti-circumcision event, not because he cared about circumcision, but because he wanted an excuse to bash feminists. This guy can't possibly be called an MRA, because he's admitted to not caring about men, not caring about equality, and only wanting to attack feminists because feminists are dishonest people. Good Lord, if anyone ought to be branded as not an MRA, just an anti-feminist, it would be your friend Nick. So again, Bane, you either convince me there is a very real difference in the practice between anti-feminist and MRAs, or you knock off this cop-out of defending the MRM by branding MRAs you don't like just anti-feminists. And in closing, let me say this. My issue with the men's rights movement is that it is hyper-fixated on feminism, and at best uses inequality to men as a pretense to give their feminist bashing legitimacy. It's no different than when feminists hyperfixate on patriarchy, so that they can hide their man-bashing behind the pretense that they are attacking a social system of inequality. The real motive for the MRM to bash feminism is that they believe feminism is a communist conspiracy to convince women to get jobs and break from traditional gender roles, which will break up the nuclear family, and somehow that will make our country communist. For those MRAs out there who disagree with this philosophy and want to claim that not all MRAs are like that, and then go on to tell me how the MRM is about men's rights, I say save it. Rather than excuse-making and deflections, take this constructive criticism I have given you and do something with it. If you don't want your movement to be seen as some far-right extremism laced with Alex Jones conspiracy theories about government plots to turn us into communists, then stand up and fight against those who preach the message. If you want to keep telling people that MRAs and anti-feminists are not the same thing, then prove it. Prove it with your actions. Stand up and differentiate yourself from the anti-feminist. Differentiate yourself from the Alex Jones conspiracy theorists like Rocking Mr. E and all the people having a shit fit about how big communist government is going to get us and that's why we need to fight feminism. Fight against people who claim that all of the inequalities men face is strictly the result of a movement called feminism, which is just socialism with a vagina. Either fight against these people loud and hard, or I'm sorry, but me and everyone else will continue to lump you all together. Also, people who use the excuse that women getting jobs is not natural. You need to understand something. These people are one and the same. They hide their advocacy for traditional gender roles behind the Bible. They hide it behind the panic of a communist takeover. They hide it behind the argument from nature. It's the same agenda, different excuses. And I don't believe there are hardly any people out there claiming women participating in the workforce is unnatural that don't also subscribe to the theory that it's a communist plot. And as I pointed out, men working all day long while women stay home with their feet propped up watching TV is not how we evolved for 2 million plus years or the 50 million years before that in our primate stage. This is a brand new development. It isn't natural, and thus the argument that we have to establish traditional gender roles because you can't fight nature is completely made up far right-wing propaganda. Fight these people, fight them hard, and chase them out of your movement, or their voice will be so commonplace that it becomes the voice of your movement. In fact, it already is. And trying that cop-out of saying, well, those people aren't real MRAs, they're just anti-feminist, isn't going to work. Feminists don't differentiate between the two. The mainstream media doesn't differentiate between the two, and I don't differentiate between the two. Either fight the regressive traditionalist or they win. That's a fact, and that's a promise. And lastly, I don't want people to think that this video was an attack on Bane. He was the only guy who left any really nice comment, well, one of the very few people, I should say, who left any sort of a polite comment on my channel, so the last thing I want to do is attack him. This isn't an attack, it's more like a discussion. And that's all. Have a nice day.